go ahead and call this meeting to order. Say the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Alright, looks like we don't have a quorum for BZA, so that will not be an official meeting. And then we do have a quorum for the planning commission. So we will have an official meeting for that. Alright, first item on the agenda is last month's meeting minutes, which Diana emailed to everybody. So everybody's had a chance to look at those. Do I have a motion to accept last month's meeting minutes?
I motion.
Alright, I got a first motion.
Can I make a second?
You may.
Okay.
Alright, I got a second motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, meeting minutes are accepted from our August meeting. Okay, so first, Dave, you wanna talk about your wayfinding information first? I know last month we talked about, the banners and accepting the kind of the design idea, and we talked about doing kind of a 50-50 mindset with how much the businesses would contribute to purchasing the banners.
Okay.
And then how much the town would contribute. And I didn't know if we had thought about like what the formal, is there gonna be a contract, do you think? Or like how do we like formalize that with the business that wants to purchase or contribute? Are we gonna?
I hadn't worked through any of that.
Okay.
So you guys have actually talked about it more than I even thought about it. The main thing I wanted to get done was approval of the design and hardware, and then present that to the town council for approval of purchase, and then get the banners in here, look at the size of them, and then figure out locations of where to put them. I don't know if does that have to be approved by the town council as well, or is that something we can just go ahead and do?
I don't think the town council needs to weigh in on where the locations. I think obviously we picked, they're already used to Duke Energy utility poles, and we're gonna
Right.
put them in places that are appropriate
Right.
for
So
wayfinding. So I
Right.
think what would determine location to me would be,
where we need the location,
right,
but the wayfinding.
we're saying Lambert Park's this way, but we don't want that flag
Exactly, yeah.
to
So
go
it's-
down by DVI, we want that flag to be.
But as far as the formality or whatever of the sponsorship of the businesses and the process that goes through, I haven't thought anything about that.
Okay.
I mean, other than we wanted to do it.
Right.
Other than that, I haven't.
Yeah, and that's, we talked a little bit last month about that idea of 50-50, so town
Okay.
would
That's,
pay 50%, the business would pay 50%, and then we would, but we can move forward with that
So-
once we get it approved by the,
so do we wanna just go ahead and have the town purchase the items before we get the sponsorship, knowing we may or may not have sponsorship for every location that we put up a banner?
what's it right there?
That's a good question.
Cause we may end up with a location where we don't have someone that wants to sponsor it, so then what do we do in that instance? Do we just have the town supports that location? I guess.
Yeah, we could certainly, talk to the town council as a whole and say, if we buy all the banners up front, and then when the business that wants to, be attached to that banner, they would just pay us back for that 50% of it.
Right, and that would then just go right back into a fund for.
Sure.
Main thing to me was I wanted to get the design approved and then get it approved by town council, so.
Yeah, and we did approve
Yeah, I don't have it.
A on that form, I believe.
I don't have a copy either with me anymore.
Oh, there was a, well, we approved this design that this is what we looked at last month.
Okay.
We said, yeah, this was,
I didn't know if at last meeting was it collectively decided that that is the design we wanna go with and
Yes.
the costs and everything were okay.
yes.
Alright.
All right, anything else on wayfinding banners? Did they come up with anything else that they wanted to? We have a lot of, interest from businesses in town already, so I know D&D wants to sponsor a couple of them already. And Copper Top wants to, I mean, so there's a lot of
That Brian said Integrity Mechanical.
Integrity Mechanical wanted to, yeah, so we have a lot of interest in businesses, I think. Davis
And
is gonna, yeah,
To me, I don't know, but I mean, if the business wants it out in front of their, if they want their banner out in front of their business, that's fine, but to me, it would be better marketing if it were somewhere not where the business is, you know?
well, I mean, certainly, I know from what Leanne said, D&D wants to have a couple of them.
Okay.
So they wanna have their, name on, attached to more than one, so
Okay.
that'd be, yeah, kind of marketing idea, I like that.
I like the idea of a contract though with the sponsor. Yeah, I think that would be just to have it, all our T's and I's dotted and crossed and.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay.
Very good. All right, well, we'll move on to our next items. In my email, I did forget, last month, we had on the agenda to talk about recreational vehicles, and I, was asked if we could move that to this month. And so I forgot to mention that in the email I sent out to everybody for this meeting, so, but, I would like to revisit the recreational vehicles. That's on page 13 in our UDO. Just goes through, issues on, storage, parking, and use of recreational vehicles in town on residential lots. So I can move this over here. Alright, so the bulk of the information is on this page 13. However, there is another couple of areas in our UDO that mention RVs. I'm not too sure why they have it in more than one place. Again, something that we're gonna clean up and take care of. But so for this, the current UDO reads this, so we're allowed to have one recreational vehicle stored on a residential property at a time, not more than one. And then it talks about how there can be an additional vehicle that visits for 7 days at a time, up to 2 weeks each year. So you could have your own RV and then a family member who owns an RV and wants to come and visit, they can park that on your property as well, and visit for you or at your property for, according to this UDO, for that 7-day period of time. But it can't be longer than 7 days at a time. There would have to be a break, and then another 7-day period of time at a different time, but not more than 14 days per year stored on the property for the secondary one. There is not a limit on the first recreational vehicle that you have, so you can park your own recreational vehicle and have it alongside your primary building. It does say it should be, alongside the primary building, but it should not be in front of the primary structure on the lot. So, which, I know there's one in Gilbert Woods, it's a pretty big RV, and it sticks way out into the front yard next to that building. So technically by this UDO, they're in violation and they would need to back it up so that the front of that RV is even with the front face of the house, kind of thing.
Okay. In my circumstance, since I'm gonna use my house as an example, my house does not face the road. My west side of the house faces the road. My house has a front yard and a backyard. And
Yeah,
so
who did
therefore-
that?
And,
Who did that?
code.
Yeah, some, I mean, there are definitely houses that are built where the, kind of the primary front door is not facing the street, and that's not a violation of anything, but I think under this rule, they would consider whatever side of the house is closest to the street as that front facing part of the house. So even if it's not the technical
So then
A
where-
side of your house, that's the side closest to the street, so your RV could not be closer to the road than that edge of your house.
So you're saying that he would need to park either in his backyard or his front yard,
Right.
But not closer to the road than the
but
side
not
of the house.
closer to?
Right, or on the other side of the house that's,
He could park
further
on the
away.
other side of his house.
right, what would be considered the back side of the house from the street. So,
Okay.
yeah, so the front surface of the house is whatever's facing the street in a planning document like this.
Okay.
So even though with his particular property, the front door is not facing the street, right?
Right.
I think we have lots of places like that here in town. I don't think your front door faces Iowa, right?
No.
So, yeah, so that's just construction,
I actually have two front doors.
Oh, there you go.
So,
well, yeah, construction, people are free to, have construction design differences that don't, say, okay, the front of your house has to face the street, but there is a front surface of the house from a planning perspective that's facing the street. I think the county's planning document does a little bit better job of describing this, because they talk about the front surface, not like the front of the house, so. Alright, and then so, part 4 on this, at no time shall such parked or stored recreational vehicle be occupied or used for living, sleeping, or housekeeping purposes, such as provided for visitations, except as provided for visitations above. So somebody they're not allowed to park an RV on their property and use it for living in. And now, when I see rules like this, I go, why? And so one, I researched other towns here in Hendricks County. They all have this same verbiage. None of them allow for people to live in an RV on a property, but none of them addressed my question of why. Like, what's the purpose? So I had to dig a lot, find like all kinds of stuff. So the only thing, which last month we put up this health, safety, and welfare kind of criteria for what we do. The only thing I could find was that an RV does not have the same fire protection construction guidelines in building that a residence has. So if you're gonna live in a building, there are certain fire codes you have to meet to make it safe to live in. RVs do not have any such thing. They construct it as a temporary, like, you know, using this for recreation, just similar to a car or a van or that kind of stuff. So that's, and they're literally, the NFPA was the only thing I could ever find that actually said, here's what's different. And I know we've had, you know, questions about this have come up in the past here of living in an RV on a residential property. So, thoughts on that?
Makes sense. Okay. You could have multiple families living on the same lot, and if that catches fire, how much space is there between the RV and the house, or the house next door to it? Safety would be a prime concern.
Yeah, and that's all I can find on this, is that safety was an issue, and it wasn't anything else. Like, I tried to find out if, you know, is it because towns feel like they're not, you know, getting appropriate taxes based on the fact that this is, they're using this as an accessory dwelling unit, and it's not, you're not paying taxes on it, but
And you're not paying sewer bills.
you're not
You
paying
charge
sewer
the
bills,
property
you're not
two
paying
sewer
other,
bills.
you know, utilities, that's
Property
it,
tax.
so. Right, but nothing, there was nothing officially out there saying, yeah, that's why we wrote rules like this. But literally every town in Henry County, so Plainfield, Avon, Brownsburg, Danville, all of them have some sort of a sentence in their planning, their UDO, that says no living in an RV on a property, permanent residence kind of idea. So an accessory dwelling unit is talked about in a lot of those UDOs or planning documents where you build an actual residence, what some places, some people call them in-law quarters or granny flats or whatever. So you build an extra building for somebody to live in instead of putting them in an RV kind of thing. I know you gotta have.
To everyone here, I have that situation going on in my house. And I have that situation in my house because my elderly mother-in-law had to move out, had to be taken care of due to her age and some of her health and things. And so the only way I could accommodate that was to move her out into an RV, a very nice one, on my property. And it is completely hooked up with electric, sewer, and everything. It's my intention that as soon as that's not needed, it will be gone. But I am in that situation. I checked with Doug and with Pete beforehand about it, and we did discuss about it around that there's probably some provisions in the UDO that allow for that. And not knowing that I didn't do a full digging into what I could and couldn't do, time was not with me, so I had to accommodate, and that's where I'm at.
Well, my thoughts are that there's always gonna be those exceptions, because you are gonna have things like that. Like, even for instance, if he was planning to build an in-law quarters, you know, and she needs help right now, that's not gonna happen right now. So what are you gonna do with her until, so.
And that was what we ran under. We could not get
that
it.
might have to be, you know, where you could go and get, what do you call them, I don't even know what you call them.
At the
The
time.
exception.
At the time, I could not get, I struggled for 3 weeks to get even one contractor to come out and give me a bid on adding on to the house. And one came out and he said, I can't start for 9 months. And I said, okay. So that's where we kind of switched gears. On the other side of the coin, I understand why we don't want it. And there's a side of me that I loathe the fact that I have that on my property. But I do try to do the best I can to make it look presentable and keep it up, and so it's not an eyesore, and it's not a nuisance. And I guess those are the things that I think the UDO should protect against, is those places where, if that is in town, I know we have a couple other places, I think, here in town, that this is also happening at, that it's not a nuisance, it's not an eyesore, and it blends in well with its surroundings. Now, if it were, why we would have this is, when I just have a piece of property where somebody comes in and plops down an RV instead of building a house on it, I can see where we have that, so. I'm in the middle of this, so I'm not gonna comment a whole lot. I just think we should have exceptions. And I think if we were gonna have, because I've done some thinking on this, if we have exceptions, then those exceptions, to keep it from being something that just takes off and is a habitual problem, is those exceptions, those people that need exceptions should pay a monthly permit fee to have that to the town. In other words, like $100 or $200 a month for that permit fee, that just like the sewage bill that they pay,
Well,
to
and
have
that
that
protects,
exception on their property.
and that protects the town and its neighbors too, because then if it does become an eyesore or an issue where things are happening that shouldn't be, the town can say, we're not renewing your permit.
Right. Right, and there's an impact to the person that's putting that on their property as well. So, I have an RV, but I can't afford $200 a month permit fee. I'm probably not gonna do that then.
Right.
All right, any other thoughts?
So those were my thoughts and my
Sure.
ideas, and I feel like I can't comment a whole lot about this because I'm sitting in the middle of it.
Well, and again, everything that I researched on this, the health, safety, and welfare part is, the only thing that I could find on why. Fire prevention or, the fire hazard issue, they don't design those like the residents, so the person in there is in more risk from whatever, for, whatever reason they're saying. So the variance kind of idea, that you mentioned, you paying an extra $100 a month, is it protecting that residence from the fire hazard? However, if there was a variance that included, we accept known risk, and it's not on the town. So, I mean, if the town has got a rule like this and says this is not allowed, and then something happens, and somebody, dies or is injured severely, because of a fire, and, then all of a sudden, not saying that you would sue the town, but somebody might go, oh, the town knew this was unsafe, and they let us do it anyway, so the town's just as much at fault as we are, so we're getting a lawyer, kind of thing. So how do we protect, one, I mean, I think protecting the occupant is, primary, and then afterwards, they say, we know there's a risk, we accept it, we're gonna, this is temporary until we can get this other granny flat or
Right.
accessory dwelling unit built, then we will, absolve the town of any liability related to the risk of fire. Or however we would wanna word that, I don't know if that's.
Shouldn't that be worded right in with the permit?
Yeah, I mean, and that could be the modification to this section of the UDO, where it says, where we state, okay, this is, a potential variance in, a time crunch, so we've got a family member that we have to hurry to find them placement. I mean, housing crisis is what it is. So we've gotta find them a way to have a roof over their head, in out of the elements, and we're gonna park them in this nice RV that's not an eyesore, which, again, eyesore wasn't one of the things they talk about.
No, but we all know that
Yeah,
that
I
comes
sort of
up.
certainly can happen, yeah, you can get, I mean, you know, back in the day, the Airstream, you know, little trailer house thing was not a, you know, bad looking vehicle, but if I had a Airstream from 1973 and I just decided to put it up on blocks and
Mhm.
the side of my house and let my mother-in-law live there, somebody might go,
Right,
that's detracting from, but
right.
yeah, and you don't have an Airstream parked on your property, it's a nice one, so that would be the trick here, is to just find wording to say, we are gonna allow variances in extreme situations of, you know,
X, Y, and Z.
yeah, and then when that happens, that property owner is gonna come to the BZA with their variance request and then make those agreements of, I understand there's a risk to this, I understand that there's going to be, you know, a monetary fee each month for this building permit, or however we wanna word it, it's not really a building permit, but a permission slip.
And to add to that, my thinking was that the first year fee must be paid in full. And then the second year to be paid monthly.
But you're talking about if they wanted to do a permanent,
No,
just
no,
even,
even if it's just temporary.
okay,
Yeah, I think that that's a key to this, is that none of
how bad?
this would
it be?
ever
Right,
say that this is allowed permanently. Like, so this is going to always be considered a temporary situation.
right,
And so if we allow a person to live in an RV on a residential property, it is due to that extreme circumstance with a variance and an understanding of the risk, but it is temporary, and that at the nearest available opportunity, they're going to find an alternative, whether it's building an accessory dwelling unit on their property. You know, I mean, and we've had people who've already, you know, asked about doing that. And unfortunately, in our UDO right now, we don't have a good definition of accessory dwelling unit, but we need to come up with that and define it and, you know, give that permission. But lots of people's properties in town have room for something like that. But I've always been accustomed to calling it an in-law quarters. Granny flats is another term for it, but accessory dwelling unit is
I've
a
never
full
heard that
name.
till you said it.
Really?
I've never heard
Yeah,
that.
so it's, we built one back in Roswell where I lived for, my grandma on my mom's side to live in, as she was, you know, ending, or getting near to the end of her life and stuff, so we just had this mother-in-law quarters is what,
Mhm.
so.
Do we wanna put a time limit? Like, say, not more than a year, or just leave it open?
I think if there's a financial burden to it, that it'll take care of that, and if the
So-
financial burden's high enough, it'll take care of itself.
Oh, I see, yeah, that's a
You
good
know.
idea, okay.
Yeah, that's my thinking. And like Doug has said, you know, rare exception of why and so forth, then rather than somebody that has property, plunk down a thing and it's starting an Airbnb. I know some people have asked me about that, and I go, no, it is not an Airbnb. It's not what's going on there. So, I'm
Yeah, I think
I'm happy that it's there, but it's something I had to do.
Those are definitely, good points to consider on that, is figure out how do we, make this, and again, Clayton will be the first community in Hendricks County to approve somebody living in an RV more than just that 7-day period, so we're just it'd be striking out there on our own, but.
Well, some of these RV parks, like especially in Florida, people live in.
There is a section in the UDO that discusses, I think, in one of them about a RV park, if you want to put an RV park, what you have to have and all that.
Well, what I'm getting at was what are their rules, you know what I mean? And specifications like liabilities and.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, with where your camper sits, when you signed an agreement,
Yeah.
You know, put that-
I don't recall anything in there about a fire.
Is that zoned differently? It's a,
Oh, yeah.
it'd be a business.
it would be, yeah, it would be zoned as commercial, not residential. But- All right, so we'll work on just kind of coming up with some language on this that, the living in the recreational vehicle, again, is not allowed with the exception of not only the provisions mentioned with the visitation, how also in extreme circumstances of a time crunch waiting for an accessory dwelling unit type construction or other living accommodations, and there will be a requirement that a variance be applied for and granted, and that there's a financial component or a fee where the property owner will pay for that and absolve the town of any liability related to that hazard of living in an RV.
So is that classified as like an indemnity to the town, something?
Yes, that would be, as far as I,
Clear the town of any indemnity?
yeah.
Okay.
All right, we ready to move on? Last month I handed out, different, a packet of stuff on, some changes to our district regulations. And I asked everybody to kind of take this home and mark it up and, make notes on, what kinds of, things could be changed in this to help with making this more appropriate for Clayton, because we currently, have a lot of information in here that just really doesn't make, a whole lot of sense for Clayton. Some of the stuff was just, again, we're gonna require everybody to hook up to our, city water was in there, so, and we don't have city water, so some of this stuff was, just kind of odd to me. The first one, that I looked at is, open space, and so I handed out, some papers with some, little grid kind of thing on it. One said, residential zoning and one said non-residential. An important thing to remember is that any changes we make to this UDO is going to affect zoning rules for everybody in town. At no time does any of our changes to zoning put a property owner in jeopardy of being out of, conforming compliance. So if our zoning change gets implemented and accepted by the town council, that property, they're not required to go change anything, they are now conforming non-compliant. And so this paper that I put together basically is my own personal draft of, if we make the changes that I want to make, you would say, here's the old classification, and then here's the new classification. So that anybody looking up zoning in the future can say, oh, okay, here's where open space went, or here's where, what changes happened to R1 and R4. When I looked at this, and I sat R1 and R4 next to each other, almost identical. R1 and R4 have all the same criteria. They both require an acre lot of land. They both require, the same, square footage of, work, and they both require, the same setbacks and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, why do we have an R4 and an R1 if both of them are identical? So I thought, let's combine those, add some language in there to make sure that it's covering everything. One, I didn't find a single property in Clayton that was an R1, not a single one. Anybody else have any knowledge of an R1 that I didn't find? So again, why do we have an R1 if we don't have any properties that meet that criteria? An acre lot for minimum lot width, 110 feet, 4,350, all that kind of stuff. So, anyway. All right, so in my little chart, basically I started off with looking at non-residential and what kinds of changes could be made there. Open space, we have one property in town that meets the open space criteria, Lambert Park. It's the only property in town that meets open space criteria. So I was thinking, let's get rid of open space. We're gonna just consider Lambert Park an institutional town-owned property. Maybe put a little sentence in the institutional district to allow for the park information that we have there, and move forward without open space in the future. Does anybody have any thoughts or objections to that? Getting rid of open space.
It does make sense to do that, because an open space is always gonna be owned by someone. Even if it's green space, it would be in between homes, someone's gonna own that green space, that space. Like, for instance, at the school, the area for the outdoor science project.
Where the cabin's at.
Yeah.
And that's considered institutional on our zone map,
And that's that,
because it belongs to the school.
on the school, so
Right.
we don't really get it. Other than that, it would be considered open space.
Yes.
Of course, open to public. I agree.
So that's just my thought. Again, none of this is set in stone, was just my opinions, and so if you really like open space use district regulation and you wanna keep it, speak up and we'll keep it. I just didn't, for me, I didn't see a purpose in it, and I don't think it applies. I can't think of a future use, even if we annex other spaces. I mean, spaces that we annex right now around us will be either residential or agricultural. I mean, that's what's surrounding us.
In your, maybe I'm jumping ahead. So you're gonna make R1 and R4 just R1?
That was my thought, yeah, in residential part.
Okay.
And we can go through the individual parts of that, and how that would work, but I just thought we don't need two different
They're identical.
regulations that basically say the same thing.
To jump back to the open space thing, do you need a vote or something from us, or do we?
Not now, I mean, we're gonna eventually have to, once we kind of figure out all the changes we want to make, we will have to have a public hearing and then vote after that public hearing. And then the town council will get presented with what we decided to recommend, and then they have to have a public hearing and then vote on it after their public hearing. So anytime we do mess with zoning stuff, there's 2 different public hearings have to happen.
So far we have the limited to open space zoning and moved to all agriculture.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, it won't move to agriculture, because I guess I did kind of put that across there. I probably need to change that to where open space just says omitted. So sorry, when I put that together, I eliminated a blank space. There should just be a blank space on the right-hand column across from open space, because we're eliminating it.
Okay.
And then agricultural was the next one that I messed with. And I sent everybody this email about the change. So there's a pretty good sized paragraph on the agricultural thing. And so I created a different paragraph, which I handed out to you and I emailed you. When I was looking at this, the old one says that the intent of this district is allow agricultural uses. And that's the extent of what we're gonna use this property for, or what we're allowing them to use this property for. So I typed in a Google search, what are agriculture uses, and all kinds of this big list came up, including a CAFO, and I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up. And it's a concentrated animal feed operation. So in our UDO, we currently allow for a CAFO to be put. So Mr. James Penner, who has, what's that, about 60 acres down here, if he decided to turn that into a hog farm to feed hogs, right now, under our UDO, he could. He could just say, it's agricultural land, and in our UDO, that's allowed. And I'm like, just think about what would happen in Clayton if all of a sudden we had 4,000 hogs right here on the south side of the library. So I didn't know if we wanted to come right out and say no to the CAFO, or if we wanted to make, a list, and that's what I kind of put in that paper I printed out, is all the things we will allow.
Permitted uses.
Right, so I kind of put in the different things like, growing crops and, that kind of thing. They could even open a store selling farm things like crops and that kind of stuff under that. But I don't feel like we want a concentrated animal feed operation in town. I talked a little bit to Sandy Brennan Martin, who used to raise hogs and all that kind of stuff, and I asked her about some of the things. And she, even back then, she had her hog farms out in the county and still got a lot of flack from the smell and the noise and that kind of stuff. But so
Okay.
I can just imagine what that would be like if all of a sudden.
You can't sit down on
Well, it just depends what direction the wind blows.
Right.
Such as the dump over in Danville.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we're eliminating all noxious stimuli by not having a CAFO here in town, but that would certainly be a big shock to the system if suddenly right across that little drive from the library were 5,000 hogs in a barn.
Little hogs.
Would they? No, there's one on the road towards North Salem. If you go to Danville and you take that offshoot from 39, I don't remember the number of the road, but there's a hog farm up there, so I drove by it, and, yeah, they have about 5,000 hogs there. So, but it's out away from all the towns, and it's not, so we wanna make sure that we don't get that kind of thing in Clayton. So, and if we annex, obviously that's gonna be, you know, part of that, so if we, you know, we end up getting to the point where we can annex, you know, some of Bob Brenneman's, you know, property, we have to be upfront that you can continue growing corn and soybeans and whatever else crops you want, but please no hog farms or cow feedlots or whatever else. It's interesting, in the back part of the UDO, we had that permitted use as graph or chart, and the only thing it limits is horses. So livestock, any other livestock is allowed.
See, we used to have a stockyard right out here on Clayton Engle Road.
Oh, okay.
Where at?
You know where Bob, what's his name now? Bob Rushton's house was, and he was a bus driver back when I was in school.
Yeah.
It was the first house that that you pass after you get on Clayton Engle Road, get out of there. Almost right across from there, down in the field.
Do you know what, I don't know how to pronounce it, arable farming is? One of these that you gave us? A-R-A-B-L-E? Arable?
Arable land is land capable of being plowed and used to grow crops. Ultimately, for the purposes of agricultural statistics, terms often more precise definition. Arable land is land under temporary agricultural crops, temporary meadows, mowing of pastures, land in a market, kitchen gardens, things like that.
Thank you. I had never heard of that term.
Yeah, I just copied that list that I
Right.
got when I Googled, so I had, the only one I didn't recognize and had to look up was the CAFO, and thought, oh, when I started looking at that, let's talk about that. All right, anything else on, either open space or agriculture? I don't wanna, I mean, we could spend hours on this packet today, and I don't wanna go too much longer since it's already 6:48, but, I thought we could at least, you know, knock out a couple of these each time and discuss where we wanna go. Is everybody in favor of limiting agricultural, that we can't do a CAFO? All right, very good.
And the combination of R1 and R4.
Yeah, we'll talk more about those, next time, just because we need to, hammer out R1. The only difference between R1 and R4 was R1 was a single, family residence district, and R4 was a multifamily residence district. So, we would have to just kind of hammer out, do we want R1, the new R1, to allow for both single and multifamily dwellings? Like multifamily dwellings that we have here in town are the doubles that Dwayne Lane has built. So,
Are the apartments not considered multi-level?
multifamily, they are, yeah, they're multifamily also. All right, last week we also talked about the recycling, setup, like what we did for getting this bench, that we have out here and kicking off a new, season. And so I got onto the Trex website, signed us up for another year, and so we, have to collect 1,000 pounds of bags. I think we already have probably half that down in the basement right now. Got a lot down there, I've gotta weigh them all. But, so we've started another one, and so in 360 some days, we'll, have to have that 1,000 pounds turned in, and I'll just take them to Kroger a
Do
little
you
while.
have collection boxes in town now?
So the collection boxes are still up at Copper Top and at Miss B's Tees. I'm gonna go and talk to, either the Stacks or, like the store or somebody else that wants to, the library doesn't wanna participate this year with collecting. They wanna take a break from that, which I can kind of understand. They had some issues last year with people were stuffing those plastic bags in the book return box.
I wonder if the school would consider having a drop box.
Yeah, they might, I can go ask them. All right, any other issues, that anybody wants to bring up that we haven't discussed yet about planning, zoning, UDO, or anything?
I will write up some ideas on the band sponsorship, unless someone else wants to, I can write that up. And then also, I will come up with a map that shows key placement of where a banner really needs to be to utilize the wayfinding signs, you know.
Okay.
In certain spots.
Yeah.
There's definitely spots where we have to have a banner so we can have the drop down wayfinding.
Excellent, very good.
I saw the art store is on,
Yes,
that's sad.
it is very sad. Rumor has it that it's going to be a Pilates instructor has signed grant papers to start October 1st-ish.
Okay.
So, there you go.
I do good to
Good
ride my bike for 10 minutes.
Pilates on. Huh?
I do good to ride my bike for 10 minutes.
There you go. All right, well, if, no other business, we will adjourn till next month. Thank you, everybody, for our